Hello! So today I want to talk about my book goals for 2020. In 2019 I read about 45 books. That includes some graphic novels. I kept that in mind while I was coming up with my goals for this year. I don't want to plan out my whole year. I just kind of want to have some goals to have in mind when picking up books based on what I did or did not do last year. Jumping right into it, my first goal is to read more new books, at least two. I'd like to read two new books, and when I mean new, I mean published this year, so published in 2020. The reason for this is because so often a new book comes out and I might get it right then, but then I won't read it forever. I have a few books that came out last year and I still haven't read them yet because I have so many other books that I've had for so long that I want to read that I just haven't had time to get to yet. So it's hard to justify that, but I'm making it a goal to do that because I want to read it right when it comes out. Have it be totally fresh, new, and experience it as new with everyone else as well. I did look up some books that are coming out next year. There was a list I found of anticipated fantasy and science fiction books. There were a few on there that I liked. I wrote them down. There was The Golden Key by Marianne Womack, The Girl and the Stars by Mark Lawrence, The Obsidian Tower by Melissa Caruso, and The Sunken Land Begins to Rise by John Harrison. But I'm also open to reading a new book that's not just fantasy and science fiction, something that's from a different genre. So we'll see what the new year brings. So my next goal is to read more self-published books. Part of the reason that I don't read a lot of self-published books is because most of the books that I have are physical books that I've purchased at independent bookstores. And I feel like the easiest way to get a hold of self-published books is to either get an ebook or to buy it online. I don't really read a lot of ebooks and I don't like buying books online, but I would like to read more self-published books, so I'm going to either see if I can find like self-published books that are being sold at some independent bookstores. There's a couple independent bookstores I have in mind that might have some self-published books, and then I'm gonna try reading more ebooks. I'm currently reading one self-published book on my Kindle, but I'm not going to count it because I started it a while ago, so it's not going to count towards the goal, even though I'm probably going to finish it in 2020. Anyway, my next goal is to read some more nonfiction, primarily historical nonfiction. I've read some nonfiction this year, but only one was historical nonfiction. I have Eric Larson's book, In the Garden of Beasts. I've read two of his books in the past and I really like them, so I'm looking forward to reading this one. I feel like it's a safe bet that I'm going to like what he writes, but I would like to find another historical fiction or nonfiction author that I would also enjoy. Yeah, I'd like to break into that genre. Then my next goal is to finish at least 2 anthologies that I own. So I have a few short story anthologies and I'd really like to get through them. I'd really like to finish a couple of them, at least 2. They're all from the same publisher. I bought them because they were on sale and they're shiny and I like shiny books. But I have Swords and Steam. I have one on science fiction short stories and one on murder mayhem short stories. So murder and mayhem is what I've gotten the most through, so I'll probably finish this one, and then it's just a question of which of these 2 I'm going to finish. I could have swore I started both of them, but my science fiction one doesn't have a bookmark, So we'll see about that. I also have a collection of novellas by Ursula Le Guin, and I would love to read all of that, but it is pretty big. My final goal is to reread at least 2 books. I used to reread books all the time, and I love rereading books because you always get a new experience out of it, and it's fun to return to a story that you know that you love. And I haven't done that in a long time. I didn't do it this year. I read a lot of new books, which is great, but I really want to go back to some old books. I have a couple of books in mind. There's one that I've reread often. That's Cushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. My copy's pretty banged up. You can see it's worn out from use. But a friend of mine said she might read this year, so if she does, then I probably will reread it as well. But some other options for rereading, I might reread The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. That was a really fun read, and I wouldn't mind returning to those characters. And then there's a book that I found at a thrift shop. It's a book that I read when I was a kid. It's Fall of a Kingdom by Hilary Bell. I remember really enjoying this series, so I was super excited when I found it. So I wouldn't mind rereading this because it's been a long time since I read it. So those are the options for that category. I could pick up something else, but who knows. So I want to reread at least 2. Those are all my goals, and that brings it to about 12 books, or at least 12 books. So I'll try to do at least 1 a month. It would be nice if I did more than 1 a month, because then I could get through them and maybe re-evaluate my goals like halfway through the year. I wouldn't mind doing that. And then I also have, outside of my goals, books that I'm expecting to read. They're not a part of my goals because I don't need a goal. I already know I'm going to read these books. It's just gonna happen. So of those, I'm definitely gonna finish the Dune series this year. I just finished God Emperor of Dune, so I'm probably gonna start the new year with Heretics of Dune, and then Chapter House Dune. And then I am going to read at least the next 2 books in the Wheel of Time series. I read book 1 and 2, so I need to read 3, and I'm getting through 3 mostly because I want to get to 4, because I've heard things about 4 that make me more excited for it, and so I'm definitely going to read 3 and 4 because I want to get to 4, so I'm definitely going to read 4. I don't know how much I'll read after that. This year, I would like to say that I'm going to get through more of the series this year, but based off of how many I read last year, I don't want to promise anything that I can't deliver. I also expect to read Lord of the Rings this year. I was going to read it last year, or when I say this year, I mean 2020. I was going to read it in 2019, but when I was going to start it, I finished Hobbit, and I was going to start Lord of the Rings, but then I started reading Dune, and that just kind of took all of my time. Not all of it, but it was like, I try not to read too many big series at once, so I was so focused on Dune, I knew I couldn't start Lord of the Rings. But with Dune almost done, Lord of the Rings is going to happen. And then I also plan on starting Earthsea. I'm very excited for that. I have the first one. I don't have the second one, but I'm going to look for it. I don't know how much of it I'll read this year. It depends on when I start it, but I do plan on starting this year. So, out of all the books that I am hoping are part of my goals, and then I'm also expecting to read this, about 20 books, which is half of what I read last year. And that's good for me. I like to have a lot of wiggle room for spontaneous reads, because I really like when I finish a book to be able to just pick up whatever I feel like reading. I can always try and anticipate what I'm going to want to read, but you never know until like the moment when you have to actually pull something off the shelf and you're like, you know, I thought I was going to pick up that book, but this other one that I wasn't thinking about at all is actually sounding really, really enticing. So we'll see. If you have any suggestions for some of the books that are on my, like some of the books that would fit into my goals for 2020, feel free to comment and let me know. I wouldn't mind at all if I got some suggestions for nonfiction authors. I have no idea where I'm going to go with that. I am pretty open on subjects. I'm not a huge fan of military history, but if I can find a good author, then I'll read almost anything by them. Eric Larson is an example. So if you can suggest like a really good author, then I would be very, very appreciative. So yeah, thank you. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful new year. Tell me your reading goals for 2020. I'd love to hear them. Comment below.